This is America, and this is the U.S. Supreme Court, which has allowed women to continue to access abortion medication by mail. But the ruling has done little to end the debate about whether state and federal governments should have control over abortion access. I'll have more on that later, but first it's over to Rob Matheson in our Washington studio.
Yeah, thanks, Heidi. We're 5 months from the midterms, and once again, abortion rights may become a key issue. The latest Supreme Court decision means access to abortion medication is front and center, and it could sway a lot of votes. Now, it could also affect how much the federal government can regulate drugs across the country. And there are worries about the kind of legal repercussions that patients and medical practitioners, maybe even mail services, could face. At the heart of the issue should be what's best for pregnant women. That doesn't always seem to be a political priority. We're going to start with what's happened at the Supreme Court. Richard Gaisford breaks it down.
It's been nearly 4 years now since justices here at the Supreme Court removed the constitutional right for women to have an abortion after they overturned the Roe versus Wade decision of 1973 that protected women's ability to seek a termination. In effect, it handed the decision to individual states as to whether abortions should be allowed or not. Some, like Louisiana, banned it entirely. Others brought in restrictions that in some cases made accessing services almost impossible. In the remaining states, abortion is largely legal. The state of Louisiana prohibits the use of remote consultations to provide abortion care. It went to court last year to argue that the Food and Drug Administration's policy of allowing people to get abortion medication via telemedicine and then having it delivered from out-of-state providers interferes with the state's own ability to regulate abortions in Louisiana. The FDA first removed the requirement for the abortion medication to be dispensed in person during the pandemic. Before this, patients had to visit a clinic, a medical office, or a hospital. In 2021, the FDA conducted a comprehensive review to see whether this approach was risky or not. It decided it was safe and removed burdens on the healthcare system. In 2023, it formally removed the requirements for in-person dispensing, meaning that women could get the drug through an online consultation.
When you use the abortion pill, you actually take 2 different medicines to end a pregnancy, Mifepristone and Mifepristone.
And it allowed approved pharmacies to dispense the medication and send it to women in the mail. That meant there was a big rise in the number of women in anti-abortion states looking for help, wanting to deal with unplanned and unsafe pregnancies. This month, the appeal court in Louisiana agreed with the state and said the FDA should revert to in-person dispensing. But drug manufacturers immediately asked the court to pause its decision so they could appeal to the Supreme Court. It will now decide if Louisiana had a legal right to bring the case in the first place. Well, whilst all that rumbles on, the Supreme Court has allowed women to continue getting abortion medication by mail. When the final decision does come from the justices, it could well act as guidance for other anti-abortion states and also have real-world implications for Americans looking to get all manner of medication by mail. Richard Gaisford, Al Jazeera, at the Supreme Court in Washington.
Well, some states have already got bans in place, have passed laws to further target abortion-inducing drugs. As of July 1st in Mississippi, people will face up to 10 years in jail if they're found to have dispensed or prescribed or manufactured abortion medication. In Texas, people can sue individuals or companies that mail or transport abortion medication in or out of the state. And Louisiana has classified abortion medication as a controlled substance, and that limits how it can be dispensed. But that is being challenged in court. Proponents of reproductive freedom say those new laws, on top of existing abortion bans in some states, have led to more dangers to women and unnecessary deaths. Heidi Jo Castro has more.
Few cases have motivated Lupe Rodriguez, executive director of the National Latina Institute for Reproductive Justice, as what happened to Josely Barnica, a 28-year-old woman who went to a Texas hospital when she began miscarrying her second child. At that time, Texas had just begun enforcement of a ban on abortions if embryonic cardiac activity is detected. Doctors couldn't stop the miscarriage, but they also refused to help end it until the 17-week-old fetus no longer had a heartbeat. That took 40 hours of labor for Barnica. During that time, she contracted an infection that killed her 3 days later.
It's obviously a story that caused so much terror and anguish in us, and made us think, how many other people are suffering in this same way and not, whose stories are never going to be told.
Rodriguez says Barnica would likely have survived if she had lived in a state without an abortion ban.
Of course, in these states where people can get that care freely and where medical doctors can make decisions to save people's lives, she would have received the care she needed and she wouldn't have perished.
Researchers at Johns Hopkins University looked at whether more pregnant women are dying in states with abortion bans and found the risk of pregnancy-associated deaths rose by about 9% in those states. That was the equivalent of 68 more women dying during the first year of the state bans. The recent Supreme Court ruling allowing for self-managed medical abortions across the country was a win for those who advocate for abortion rights. But the landscape is still legally precarious, as doctors who prescribe abortion medicines through the mail can still be exposed to criminal investigations if they travel to states where abortions are banned.
It's an extremely fraught position to ask doctors to practice medicine in, again, especially in emergency circumstances, and even outside of the legal consequences and the chaos that creates in a clinical setting. It also creates immense moral injury and moral distress for providers.
At the heart of the debate, the lives of women, while anti-abortion advocates say they're protecting the lives of the unborn. Polls show 60% of Americans say abortion should be legal in all or most cases. But politically and judicially, the matter is still unsettled, leading to difficult decisions for women and doctors. Heidi Jo Castro, Al Jazeera, Washington.
We're joined now by a former senior congressional GOP advisor, Rina Shah, and by Democratic strategist James Butler. Good to have you in the studio. Thanks very much indeed for being with us. I want to ask you, first of all, your stance on abortion and abortion rights. The reason for that is obviously this is a very contentious issue. We want to give our viewers as much context as we can. Rina, can I start with you?
Sure. I'm anti-abortion for myself, but I'm pro-choice for other women.
And James?
I am totally for women's reproductive freedoms, and I'm actually, Robin, disappointed that we have to be here again to discuss what I consider an assault on a woman's reproductive health rights. Okay,
I want to pick up on that with Rina. Supreme Court is 6-3 conservative. It overturned Roe Wade in 2023. Now it says abortion medication can still be sent by mail. What's happening with this decision?
Well, I think it's really important to note what the Dobbs decision was. It returned power to the states. And when you look at the states that have passed protections, many red states have. So again, Republican-led states have done that. But now with this medication, abortion by medication, available so widely, we have entered a whole new frontier. Women are taking matters into their own hands, oftentimes without needing to visit with a provider. I think this is a very scary time where the women who are most vulnerable will suffer the most. And I think that is what the hypocrisy of the decision has really exposed.
James, what's your take on this?
Mifepristone has been prescribed for the last 25 years, and it's been safely prescribed for women throughout the country. It's been prescribed in 96 different countries. And women have been able to, the status quo has been that women that wanted a chemically induced abortion would use it. My concern is that you have one state, you have 9 states in total, which have essentially absolute bans on abortion and have criminalized it. And my feeling is that you cannot have one state hijack all 50 states, especially those states where abortion is legal. Now, abortion is legal predominantly throughout the United States. 22 states have put shield laws in place. to protect those that choose to get it through mail and other means. But I just cannot envision a fair court, allowing one state that can't figure out a way to enforce its criminalizing of an abortion to hijack all 50 states.
Yeah, I think we have to enforce state authority here and also close loopholes that endanger the lives of women. That's what I'm most concerned about, because when you look at how early abortions really dominate the number of abortions in general, you see a lot of perhaps incomplete abortions. Maybe there's going to be better reporting now on that. You're going to see women who have follow-up needs present themselves at the doctor's office. Maybe we'll start to get better data on that. This is, again, a modern problem. So this is, we don't have a full understanding. I am also very concerned about the emotional and physical impacts that are often downplayed. And that is why I believe it's important in my family that if my husband and I have an unintended pregnancy, we would carry forward with it, because I think there's a lot there that we don't know. That yes, modern science is there and can meet a woman where she chooses to have liberty, which is with her body. But there's a host of other issues that the state hasn't yet solved for.
Yeah, in order to be able to try to illustrate this, we spoke to a doctor earlier on who's from North Carolina. It's worth saying that abortion is illegal after 12 weeks in North Carolina, and delivery by mail of the pills to the state is illegal as well. And I asked Dr. Clayton Alfonso, he's an OB-GYN at Duke University Medical Center, and I asked him what his patients would want to see in North Carolina where he works. Let's listen to what he had to say.
In North Carolina, our patients want clarity on what is legal. The vast majority of patients I've talked to have never had to think about legal aspects of approaching healthcare. And so when I see them in clinic with an unplanned pregnancy, a lot of them are surprised at the onerous work that has to happen in order for them to get an abortion in North Carolina. The 72-hour waiting period, the mandatory in-person appointments. And then there's a lot of fear that they're going to have legal challenges for themselves of whether or not they could be sued, whether or not they're going to end up on some sort of list where the government is monitoring them. And so I'm having to allay a lot of their fears towards seeking healthcare, whereas a decade ago when I was doing this care, patients were able to just make the decision that was right for them and their families and move forward with care.
And what about the medical profession itself? How concerned do you think doctors are when it comes to the potential legal risks that they could be facing?
In certain states, some of this has become a felony where you could lose your medical license if you're caught practicing abortion care in those states. And so that loses your ability to continue to practice medicine, hold a medical license, and even vote in those states. And so there is a lot of conflict between our desires to care for patients, our oath that we took to care for patients and to provide excellent evidence-based healthcare, with the result that we could face significant fines and loss to the ability to practice the medicine that we are doing. And so a lot of us are staying, well within the confines of the law and having to then seek legal opinions for cases that are on the borderline, which is very unfortunate. We're just trying to provide the best care to our patients.
I want to talk to you about the legal situation that patients face when they come to you, for example, because one of the considerations is invariably that there is going to be some sort of waiting time whilst that legal process is put in place. Do you ever find yourself in the situation where there is a patient's life may be in danger or they may be risking severe complications whilst that legal process is carried out?
Thankfully for us in the state of North Carolina, the legislation that restricts abortion here is broad. And so it does give us permission that when a patient's life is in danger that we can intervene. And so we have thankfully not been in many situations where we're having to wait the mandatory 72-hour waiting period. So we can waive that when there is a life-threatening situation in our pregnant patients. So we're very grateful for that leeway, but I know our patients in states to the south are having a lot harder time sometimes seeking care when they can't travel to North Carolina, when they are in those situations. And clinicians that I know in the Atlanta area are having to wait for the hospital to approve it, contact lawyers, contact hospital administration in order to provide that care.
How do you see this playing out?
You know, it's hard to predict the future, especially with our current Supreme Court makeup. I do see that we are going to continue to be able to provide abortion care. I think we could continue to face some significant challenges, especially here in the Deep South and all of the red states. But I do think over time, the ability for us to care for patients is going to persist. I think we're going to continue to find ways to provide excellent evidence-based care. And I do see us moving the needle forward as we continue to progress in the United States.
So, Dr. Alfonso, they're explaining the kind of legal difficulties that the doctors are facing. This comes back to the point you were making before, Rena, about the clarity that's required, particularly the division between the responsibilities of federal and the responsibilities of state.
Well, before I became a mother, I could tell you I saw this issue as very black and white, one that was about freedom entirely. And now I see it as a very difficult issue because I understand now with the abortion pill, the access that women have to it by mail, things can get really complicated. And I'm talking about really not just what your state believes, what your local community believes are the rules around abortion, the ability to terminate an unintended pregnancy. I believe we're sitting at just a really unique place in history because there is a possibility, it's called the progesterone protocol, a possibility to reverse the abortion pill's effects. And it's been shown, some studies, something like between 47 and 68% of success in continuing pregnancies if it's given early enough after Mifepristone. So the pro-life groups that I am aware of have been promoting this as giving women a second chance. And they say that if even one woman changes her mind, we should make reversal options widely available and informed consent mandatory. Again, informed consent is another complicating layer here. So I think if science shows it's possible, why hide that option? The vast majority of women, including myself, did not know that was a possibility. Republicans will argue that they stand for life at every stage and they want to protect mothers and that they believe that abortion is not healthcare, that it's ending a beating heart. And they also talk about supporting alternatives like adoption and crisis pregnancy centers. None of that is really enough when we see, again, advances such as the abortion pill.
The Dobbs decision, with all due respect, overturned Roe v. Wade, a victory for those proponents of anti-abortion. But what it did is it put it to the states. The vast majority of the states, and polling shows the vast majority of the people are in favor of a woman's right to choose. What we cannot do is take 9 states and allow them to affect the entire country and what happens. And this is not only about the abortion pill, it's about the abortion pill being used for things such as miscarriage, Cushing's disease. It's also about how doctors can prescribe medicine via telehealth. So this will have broad legal implications well beyond one state getting to say what happens because if the Supreme Court decides to hear this in a fashion and not, decline the case or say it's a standing issue, what I think we're going to have is telehealth affected in so many ways. And we're going to also, when it comes to the abortion pill, we're going to be sending women back to clinics. What about those women that live in rural areas?
I think you bring up a great point about the telehealth portion because the criminality here is what a lot of really Republican legislators want. They want to criminalize women. They want to, again, criminalize doctors. And so then it makes a very unsafe environment for people to get whatever they need to survive. We'll start to see those back alley abortions again, which is what those women's groups have advocated for. So it is very tricky on that front because I certainly don't believe in criminalizing doctors. And we just don't know where it stands because, again, that can be done across state lines as of right now.
Unfortunately, we have our shield laws in 22 states in the District of Columbia that will protect many of these doctors.
But it's not all states, and I think that's the issue.
I'm with you there too.
I wanted to move on to how this is going to play out politically, because of course we're running up to the midterms and so on. Now, given the decision that the Supreme Court has just made, one would anticipate that the Democrats are going to be thrilled with this, that this is something they can get their teeth into. Where are the risks for the Democrats in the way that they might approach this if they regard this as essentially an easy win?
I don't think there's any downside for the Democrats. In fact, I think they really need to play on this. And if I will tell you, there's a reason why the administration, Trump's administration's FDA has been directly attacked by a state. They have said, hey, look, what you're doing federally should not prevail because of XYZ. Trump has not waded into the waters because he knows abortion was a hot topic in 2024. He doesn't, he wants to really toe the line with his base and swing voters. Swing voters are the ones that put him there. So I can guarantee you he's going to stay away from it. The last thing he wants to do with sinking poll numbers is to revive an abortion issue, which he knows that women's rights are popular amongst the vast majority of Americans. We're now in a forever war in Iran. We haven't ended the Ukraine war. We just breaking news about an hour ago, maybe in a conflict with Cuba. And we've got an indictment of Raul Castro. We've got gas at $4.50 an average a gallon. The price of eggs hasn't lowered. His poll numbers are continuing to sink. And it looks like Democrats are careening in the right direction to win midterms. He's not going to touch it. There is no side for Democrats.
Yeah,
no
and
downside.
it's quite clear that obviously this is a subject that's being talked about by lawmakers. Missouri's Republican Senator Josh Hawley has introduced a bill to ban chemical abortion drugs, and he says that the drug manufacturers have supported the easing of restrictions so that they benefit financially.
They advocated at every turn to reduce the safety prescriptions, to reduce the safety protocols, to remove all of the guardrails. Why? So that they could make more money. Oh, and have they made it? They have made billions of dollars. They make so much money, this is the only drug they make. And guess what? They're not even based in the United States. They're incorporated in the Cayman Islands. The Cayman Islands. Why? So that they can avoid American liability, so that they can avoid the American court system.
Picking up at the point that James was making there, Donald Trump had promised, of course, in this first term, he was going to put Supreme Court judges in to overturn Roe v. Wade. That happened. Now we have this situation with the Supreme Court, and the Trump administration is silent on this. And James touched on this. What's your take on this?
Well, because even with most suburban women, you're looking at this issue, they're framing this issue as one about personal freedoms. So the Trump administration understands that they shouldn't wade into this, because then it talks, essentially walks and talks like it's a personal freedoms issue, and they don't want to mess with that. I think anybody who supported what they heard from Senator Hawley there is essentially believing that pushing pills without doctors is not exactly women's empowerment. It's reckless, and they believe in reinstating what they call common sense safeguards, things like in-person visits and accurate risk disclosure, and they don't want to bypass state laws as well. So that is the argument they're hoping wins out with the court and wins out at the court. But you won't see on a political level any Republican that isn't very far right touch this.
Yeah, there are, just very briefly, there's a lot of talk about this online, of course, and we did pull together some women who are saying things about this online.
Without any action, these anti-abortion politicians will absolutely do what they can to wipe out telehealth medication abortion, leaving millions in this country without any options for care.
I think the majority of this generation, when we talk about chemical abortion, thinks of chemical abortion as like the baby magically just like reabsorbs into your body. I'm like, no, there is a baby, and there's gonna be one or two things that happen. Either there's gonna be a living baby or there's a dead baby.
Hey, do you guys remember when Trump got elected and I freaked out and told you to stock up on abortion pills because they're gonna make it harder to get them? Never tell me I'm overreacting ever again.
If mail order abortion wasn't a thing, I'm 100% sure I would have my child.
This was post-Roe, Texas. So ending a non-viable pregnancy is considered an illegal abortion. I had to wait until I met one of the rare medical exceptions in Texas, life of the mother. For 3 days, I waited to get sick enough to deserve care. I went into septic shock twice, and permanently lost the full functionality of my reproductive organs.
Abortion is not birth control. Abortion is healthcare. That's all.
Do you think I'm an evil person for having an abortion?
No.
Then why? So
I'm
if
sorry
I
you
were to
had
get,
an abortion. And
I'm not.
And I wish
I'm not sorry.
I wish you felt like you didn't have to choose
No,
between
I
your
wanted
life
to
and your
choose
child.
that.
Rena, I'm going to come back to you on how the parties should be dealing with this in the run-up to the midterms, particularly, of course, the Republicans.
Yeah, with Republicans, my counsel would be avoidance. You know, this is, to me, it's settled. It's thrown back to the states. And so any federal level Republican doesn't need to engage. Even with the new talk of the pill and Mifepristone is what I mean here. The genuine sentiment out there with most independent voters, who are the most important block for them, is that this is decided by the Supreme Court. And whatever now the complications are regarding the pills should also maybe perhaps sit with the woman who's got the pregnancy. And it is, again, a personal freedoms issue. So I think as much as pro-life groups try to give the verbiage that I shared earlier, it is an uphill battle for them because they already have gotten one taste. They've gotten one bite of the pie here, and they've gotten what they needed, essentially, is what I think most people feel. And so they really risk alienating a block of voters if they lead with the abortion issue.
James, Democrats say they support women's right to choose in real terms. How would they deal with states like Louisiana, Mississippi, and Texas, who have such entrenched rules and regulations with regard to abortion?
In 2022, the FDA cleared women to receive the abortion pill via telehealth and other non-in-person methodologies. And that's been dispensed since that time safely. It's not the Democrats' problem. And it's not states that have legalized and not criminalized abortions. It's not our problem. It's going to be up to these red tape states to figure out how to get around this. And I'm not proffering a solution here because I think it's a very difficult one. But so too was it a difficult thing when the blue states had to deal with the overturning of Roe v. Wade.
Rena, finally, with regards to the state responsibility within this, is there a way, do you think, that the states would be able to make this work, that they'll be able to find some sort of balance in order to be able to make this go forward?
I think so. I'm very encouraged by certain states where you've got some progressive thinkers in healthcare roles because they understand that people need to evolve with the science. The science has evolved. You can say I'm pro-woman, pro-science, and then pro-life, but some of it doesn't square up when you see, again, the talk of the weeks when to ban abortion at. When some of it comes up, you start to see what people are doing in governing with their holy books versus actual practical logical science. I'm of course talking about talk of 6-week bans. You know, for example, for me, for all 4 of my pregnancies, I didn't realize at the 6-week mark that I was expecting. So this is a complicating factor. Whenever legislators start to talk about bans and certain weeks is when things get very messy. But at the end of the day, it is back to the states and they need to do right by their citizens.
Rena, thank you very much indeed. Former Senior Congressional GP Advisor Rena Shah, Democratic Strategist James Butler. Thank you both very much indeed. Now, that's all from the team here in Washington, D.C. We're going to be handing back to Heidi Jo Castro and Al Jazeera's global headquarters in Doha. Don't forget the website, aljazeera.com. Bye for now.
Thanks, Rob. On the next episode of This is America, we look at why 27 million Americans now find themselves without health insurance and why premiums are skyrocketing for those who do have policies. That's Thursday at 18:30 GMT or 2:30 p.m. here in the U.S. Until then, thanks for watching, and we'll see you again soon.